everyone. We're going to get started. It's great to see those of you here in the room, and also welcome to those of you joining online. I'm Mariah Besharov. I'm Professor of Organizations and Impact here at Said Business School, and I'm also the Academic Director of the School Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And I'm really thrilled to have you all here for today's Insights for Action seminar. The seminar series broadly explores how researchers and practitioners within and beyond Oxford are using research insights for action. And today we're going to be talking about the individual and organizational practice of leading for impact, and particularly exploring the importance of trust, rest, perspective, and how to build those into your leadership practice for the long term. I'm joined in this conversation by three fantastic leaders and scholars. Susanna Kislenko, Réjane Woodroffe, and Esther Benjamin. And I'll just briefly introduce each of them before we get into the conversation. Susanna Kislenko, who's here with me in the room, is the School Center Postdoctoral Fellow this year, and for a few years, actually. We're thrilled to have her here. She's a social psychologist by training. She studies leadership in the entrepreneurial context, and particularly focuses on founder leadership past the startup stage. Before entering academia, Susanna worked in the nonprofit sector for 12 years in a number of leadership roles in social service organizations. So welcome, Susanna.
Thank you.
And joining us online, Réjane Woodroffe is the director and founding member of Bulungula Incubator, a nonprofit that's engaged in integrated rural development programs in Eastern Cape, South Africa. Réjane has previously held positions of chief economist and head of international portfolio investments for Metropolitan Asset Managers, and also research analyst at Merrill Lynch. And she serves on a number of boards, including Aon Investment Managers, Data Drive 2030, the Equality Collective, and Friends of Bulungula. And finally, Esther Benjamin. Esther is the CEO of World Education Services and a visiting fellow at the School Center. Among her roles, among her prior roles, she has been the CEO for Africa Operations with Laureate Education. She led global operations for the Peace Corps, and she served as a senior executive with the International Youth Foundation and other NGOs. Esther serves on the board of directors of B Lab Global, Echoing Green, and Candid. So welcome, Réjane and Esther as well. And I want to start by asking each of you to talk a little bit about your careers and the pathways that you took to the leadership roles you hold now. And let's start with Esther and Réjane. Tell us a little bit, each of you, about your career path and the journey to your current leadership role. Esther, go ahead.
Okay. Great to be with all of you. I only wish I was in the room with everyone. It's always a pleasure to be there in the building. As I look forward to 2024, I'm reminded that next year will be 30 years since I began my professional career, and it truly is about leading for the long term. My professional journey has been deeply impacted by my personal journey, which began in Sri Lanka. And in my adolescence, I faced a civil war there, which then continued for 30 years. And I was one of the individuals who was able to leave the country. And in many ways, we were leaving the country seeking freedom and seeking safety. But even beyond that, seeking opportunity and also education access, where I had really been taken out of school because of the safety considerations. So I think in my transition from Sri Lanka to the United States and beyond, I'm just reminded of the gratitude that I should feel for the freedom, safety, the education, and opportunities that followed. So throughout my career, I often come back to something I started saying early in life after arriving in the US, which is to whom much is given, much is expected. And today I'm the CEO of World Education Services, and I've been in this role for 4.5 years. Before beginning the role, I did take a 1-year sabbatical, which was pivotal, and I will talk about that later in our conversation. But in the lead up to that, I spent many years working across sectors, spent many years leading international NGOs and civil society organizations, spent time working in the UN, working in the Clinton White House, the Obama White House, and the Obama administration. Also worked in international business. My path has been one that has been tri-sector in nature. I'm a big believer that by working across sectors, we can optimally gain all of the tools and skills to really drive social impact over the long haul. My career's also been very global. I have worked in about 120 countries around the world, and lived on 4 continents, and also worked across programmatic areas. And to me, this sort of approach of being tri-sector, being multi-regional, being global, being someone who could work across programmatic areas and see the intersection of these arenas was key to driving long-term impact. And I'll stop there and say those are the things that brought me to where I am today.
Great, thank you so much. And I think we'll definitely come back to the sabbatical issue in a little bit. We're all intrigued about that practice. And I also do want to return to some of the points you made about the cross-sector and very global nature of how you built your career, because certainly the research that I've done, and I think also the research that Susanna's done in this sort of space we work in, really points to the value of those kinds of experiences in building understanding, the ability to see across different perspectives and to work much more effectively as a leader, not only as an individual, but in building a team and really building a robust organization. But first, I want to hear from Réjane. Tell us about your leadership journey.
Sure, thanks very much. And thank you for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here to showcase the work of the Bulungula Incubator, which is so dear to my heart and I'm so passionate about. And also to share the platform with Esther, with all her experience and everything she's done in her life. And thank you for inviting me, Susanna and Jessica. It's great that it all came together and we finally here doing the seminar talking about such important issues, and that it's crucial issues in order to ensure that we develop and lead organizations that can really drive impactful change and positive change in the lives of those who need it the most. My career, it's really almost in 2 halves now. The first half of my career was in the finance industry. I spent 11 years working in the finance industry, and then left the finance industry to head up, to found and then to head up the Bulungula Incubator full time. So I spent 11 years in the finance industry, and it's going on 12 years now as a development professional. So I'm starting to be more of a development professional than the finance professional, because the development time's overtaking the time in finance. And in terms of my background and my story growing up, it's a very South African story. I was born in 1974 in South Africa, so very deep time under apartheid. And our family were forcibly removed from District 6, which, if you know any of South Africa's history, it's quite, I guess, the famous case. There were many other cases, but that is the one that reached international. So it was very much part of the international anti-apartheid movement at the time. So you might have heard about it. So our family were moved forcibly when the Group Areas Act was implemented. We were classified coloured, so moved to a coloured township. And growing up under apartheid, it's a very personal story as well, because the person who was to become my life partner is a different race to me. And we were born in the same year in 1974. So when we were teenagers, when I would have might have met him, which when we were 16, 17, 18, it was still apartheid, and when we were young teenagers, we would have been arrested for even speaking to one another. So it's a very personal story. I wouldn't have even been able to share the same toilet as the person I've been married to now for almost 20 years. So so it is a very personal story. And my career started in the finance industry, but after I'd worked in the finance industry for many years, I started feeling a desire to do something different. Being part of the anti-apartheid movement was a very seminal part of my growing up years. I was part of the ANC youth movement during my teenage years, from my high school years. And I was a leader in COSAS, which was the student movement affiliated to the ANC and to the UDF then. And I started questioning, while I was working in the finance industry, I started questioning why I just didn't feel happy, I didn't feel fulfilled. And there was something missing. And I thought back to those days when we were trying to change something in the country. And that made me look to going back to continue to build what was needed to be built and rebuilt in our country. In 1994, after we got democracy, all the activists thought that our job was over, that we had achieved what we wanted to achieve, and we all sat back and rested for a few years, and then realized actually the society was more broken than we'd realized, and there was still a lot more to do. I first came to Bulungula, to the place where we would found our organization in 2004. And at that time, the area where we are located in, under apartheid, that was classified a black homeland. And so there was no infrastructure development at all. So there was no road coming to this area at all. It was 4x4 only over rivers and hills down to the coast where we are. No access to functional education, no access at all to healthcare, sanitation, running water, any services you need to lead a flourishing human life. And in 2004, we started our very first development project, which was the Bulungula Lodge, which still exists today. It's award-winning eco lodge, 100% owned by the local community. You're all welcome to visit at any time. It's a really beautiful place. But in 2006, I was still working half in the finance industry, traveling back and forth. I wasn't yet fully committed to living here. And in 2006, a third of the babies had died of diarrhea in this area from lack of access to clean drinking water. And I was now getting to know the community, and I was attending those funerals where you were digging small graves. And that was very impactful. And we thought, it's fine to do community projects like the Bulungula Lodge and create jobs and economic development, but you're not even keeping babies alive. So that's when we launched the Bulungula Incubator as a non-profit, so that we could start to address what was a crisis situation. And we've since developed our organization from moving out of crisis response into incremental change, which is holistic place-based development strategies that we implement in rural areas. And also taking sabbaticals have been a very, very important part of the journey. The work that we do is very emotive, it is difficult, it is working with human beings and with their lives. And so it is very, very important to take rest. But I think it's important for everybody in whatever you do. Just to be a human being it's not easy, and it's not easy for anybody. And so it is very important that we take care of ourselves, and not just important for us, it's important for everybody else in our lives. It's important for our families, because the way that we show up for our families, for our colleagues in the world as a person, we can only show up in a way that is conducive to living a good life if we take care of ourselves personally first. So I'll stop there, and then we can dive into more of those topics. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. We definitely will dive in. I want to give Susanna a chance to talk about her leadership journey, and in particular, so you were working in the impact sector, you were an executive director, you had other leadership roles, and you decided to transition to an academic role studying leaders, and particularly founders of social ventures. So tell us a little bit about that journey and a little bit about your current research.
Sure. Well, as you know very well, it's an unorthodox journey. And I should mention, I think it's good context for maybe the group to know. Mariah was one of the few people that I shared my professional history with from the beginning of us meeting in the academic context. And the reason I say that is because sometimes the academic context asks us to kind of downplay it almost, because we're here to talk about theory, not practice sometimes when we're doing the research. So basically I did my undergrad degree in business, but always was curious about mission-driven organizations, and did a couple of internships while I was still in business school in nonprofits, and realized that I could use business skills in nonprofit organizations, which was at the time kind of groundbreaking. And the year I graduated from my business school, I was the only one who went into the nonprofit sector after, which today, we've I always say this at the Impact Lab sessions, like it's a dream that there's people that are trying to get into impact courses and impact programs out of and within business schools, because at the time I really was like the black sheep, and that was only 20 years ago, just to say, like, it's not like it was. So what happened was then I entered the sector, and I just, I was making my career choices based on mission. So I was working a lot with immigrant and refugee organizations and women's organizations. And I didn't mention this, but part of the reason why immigration issues are personal to me is because I am from Ukraine myself. I was born in the Soviet Union. And so my family needed to get integrated into Canada. And so in a beautiful poetic circle here, my first job out of university was actually at World Education Services, which at the time had just opened in Canada, and it just was incredible. So, what happened was, by virtue of being one of the few people in many of the nonprofit organizations I was in that had a business degree, AKA had training in, I don't know, systems or how things run in that way, I just kept getting promoted in various ways, not because I was necessarily seeking like the next level. I just wanted to work in these mission-driven organizations. And eventually I became executive director of an amazing social enterprise in Toronto. And when I had that role, I remember I was a little like, I was doing the thing, but also trying to ask sort of philosophical questions about the thing, which is leadership and change management. And at the time we were it was like an organization that was transitioning from being a pure nonprofit to a social enterprise. And as many of you might know, when you're in the nonprofit sector where resources are scarce and time is scarce, no one wants to sit and philosophize with you about leadership, right? They're like, shut up and do the job. And in fact, do 5 jobs, because there's not enough people to do them anyway. So I remember at that time, I just was kind of like, I don't know if this is it for me. And I thought if I stay in the nonprofit sector in Canada, probably what will happen is I'll just keep getting recruited to maybe lead bigger organizations, which is wonderful, but it was never my goal. It was never kind of what I was wanting to do. And so around that time, I actually got a scholarship from the Toronto Harvard Business School Alumni Club to do a 1-week exec training at Harvard Business School. I don't know if I ever told you about this even. We've known each other for years, and new things just come out. Like today I learned that Mariah plays the violin. Sorry to out you, I hope you don't mind. So what happened was, it was an exec training called an incredible one for nonprofit CEOs. And it changed my life, to be honest, because I remember actually looking at the professors and thinking, oh, like they study this full time. Like this is their thing, and I just thought, like, I want to do this, like whatever it is. And at the same time, before the ED role, I had a number of experiences working with founders, and some were wonderful and some were less than wonderful. And when they were less than wonderful, they were very less than wonderful. And so I had kind of come across this concept called founder syndrome, which is when founders kind of don't let go of their organizations. If you've seen Succession or Elizabeth Holmes, or like that's what I study. So what I ended up uncovering is there's actually not a lot of research on this at all. And in fact, there's not that much research on founders past startup, because people get very excited about the beginning stages. So that's what I eventually ended up. I eventually ended up leaving. Then it's funny, Réjane, that you said your career's in 2 parts, and I think mine is as well. And I had a very different kind of identity sort of a view of myself back in that day. And the last like decade has been almost, to be honest, like deconstructing that, like studying other people's experiences, but also thinking about my own, and all the things that I didn't know when I was in formal leadership roles, and wish I knew and wish I understood. And so this topic of well-being that we're talking about today, has also become very close to home for me. And so today I study, as I said, in a broader sense, founder leadership, but Mariah and we have a project on leadership more broadly, and it's interesting because it's actually about how do you kind of lead in an unorthodox way, in a counter-normative way, in a way that people might not expect you to lead, and how do you take care of yourself in the process? And then in my founder research, I have a number of studies that are about, well, what are the consequences to an organization if the right leader is actually not in place? And some of the hidden, I guess, impacts of that.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to dig into a bunch of that as we continue the conversation. So I want to talk about this issue of sabbaticals and the value and the practice of rest and perspective and gaining perspective. And so Réjane and Esther, you both mentioned that this practice of sabbatical taking. So tell us a little bit about why you do this, what it looks like for you, how do you do it, and how it has helped you and can help other leaders, particularly in the impact sector. Go ahead, Esther.
I'll jump in. And I have to say, I am still learning and growing in this regard. And as I see more of my colleagues who are millennials take on senior leadership, and as I see Gen X becoming more and more of my colleague base, I'm learning from them. As a Gen Xer, I think we need to pay attention to our younger colleagues who are teaching us. They have a way of thinking about work and health and wellness that is so much healthier than my generation, Generation X. So I'm a work in progress, and I am a true believer in sabbaticals. And I think Réjane and I have taken sabbaticals in different ways. We had a chance to compare a bit in preparation for this seminar. And it is interesting that today, unlike 10 years ago, sabbaticals are clearly not just for academics. I think 10 years, 20 years ago, for sure, this was something that only academics did. And today you see more and more people talking about professional sabbaticals and people talking about life sabbaticals. And people are also talking about sabbaticals as not maybe a full year off, but maybe a quarter off, maybe a few months off. But structuring that into your work life is so important. My one regret is that I didn't begin this practice earlier in my career. And I've had one wonderful year-long sabbatical, but I only wish I had done this more frequently earlier in my career. So those of you in the room who are earlier in your career, I hope you walk away from today really thinking about the breaks that you will plan in your career. This is really about planning. I think the reason I didn't take one earlier is because I thought I couldn't afford to do it. But I think with proper planning around resources and timing, I think you can do this much more frequently. And I think you can do this on different kinds of budgets. Now, at the time that I took my break, I was 49 years old. I had been working nonstop. I was exhausted, and I recognized that if I didn't take a break, my next 15 years from 50 to 65 would not be as productive or as healthy. So I took a year off, and it was a remarkable year. And it helped me to enter the current chapter that I'm in as a very different person. So some of the things I did during that break, I spent quality time with loved ones. That was number one on my list. And this was days and weeks spent with loved ones, and I needed that. I also really focused on my own personal health and wellness, which included yoga every single day for a year. It included acupuncture, and it included just learning to sleep in a healthy way again. I think over the course of my career, I had slept less and less. And in my sabbatical, that was a reset for me. And I am now sleeping, I have to say 5 years in post sabbatical, my approach to health is so much more focused on wellness. I also just structured in fun and enjoyment in life, trips with close friends and with my children, and just things I did for pure enjoyment, which often I didn't have a chance to do. I did commit to myself that I would take a full year, and I had accountability partners in the form of my own children and some very close friends who held me to taking a full year off. There were moments where I was tempted to jump back in, but I took the full year off. I did take the second 6 months of my year off to think about the next chapter, to reconnect in a more reflective way with my professional network. I did reconnect with my profession in terms of signing up for some learning programs that I had always wanted to do that I didn't have time for. I remained plugged in to some extent in the second 6 months with the boards I serve on, with campaigns I helped with, and the mentoring that I was used to doing. And all of that helped me to think about my next chapter. I also had a great life coach that I worked with every month of my sabbatical, and that helped me to plan my next chapter. And I wrapped up my sabbatical with my 50th birthday party and began my current chapter, which, as I mentioned, I am 4.5 years into, with more energy, with more sense of purpose, and with a different approach to my own health and wellness. So I'm grateful for having done this. And I plan to do this again. And I'm the biggest advocate in sharing my sort of checklist of things I did with as many people as those who have approached me in recent years who've wanted to know how I thought about a sabbatical. So a big advocate here.
Okay, and we're going to come back to you on some tips for those of us in the room who might want to learn about how to have a sabbatical that was really as amazing as yours sounds like it was. And I will say, as an academic, right, of course, that practice is longstanding in academia. It's rarely used the way you described using it, right? It's often used to write your book or to get the articles out. It's not a sabbatical in the sense of a break from work, but a chance. We often talk about it as a time to do the real work, but of course one also needs a break. So really interesting, even for those of us who have are in a profession with a history of sabbaticals. Réjane, tell us a little bit about your approach to sabbatical taking.
Yeah, in some ways similar to Esther, in some ways very different. So I'm also a very big believer and advocate for sabbaticals, but didn't necessarily start out like that. In fact, sabbatical almost seemed like a grand word to use for what we did. It was really a break from life. I mean, sabbaticals, I guess, academics might feel like we've stolen their word. But the first one that my husband and I took, we've done I've done them with my husband every time. The first one was really, it was because there was a natural break in what I was doing in my life. And I had, as I said, I was working in the finance industry, and I decided to leave the finance industry at the end of 2008. And then, you know, I was going to transition to coming to living in Bulungula full-time, where Dave was living already, because he'd started the Bulungula Lodge in 2004. So he'd been living here permanently for many years. And then we decided to have a break because the time from 2004 to 2009 had been an incredibly busy time, and it was a good time for a natural break. And the Bulungula Incubator was still very small. I mean, we'd raised some money for water tanks and to protect groundwater springs, but we hadn't employed many people. It wasn't doing sort of all the projects that it does now. So it was a good time to do it. And so we decided to go. We love traveling. And every sabbatical that we've done, we every 5th year now, we take a 1-year sabbatical. So we've done it 3 times. 2009 to 2010, and then again 2015 to 2016, and the most recent one was in 2021. And every time we go on these sabbaticals, they've got nothing to do with studying or academics at all. We travel, so we backpack. And again, it's about planning. People often think, you know, where will you get the resource to do it? You do have to save for the time that you're not, of course, earning money during that year. But saving for the trip, it does depend on where you're going to go and what you're going to do. So our very first one in 2009 and 2010, we backpacked through India on a motorbike, actually. Both of us on one motorbike with our backpacks on either side. So it was quite an adventure. And then just traveling on local transport, local buses, local trains on the Indian subcontinent, and then to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, and, you know, that region of the world. And then we came back very rested and energized, and that's where that's a very good reason, an important part of the reason why the Bulungula Incubator has become the organization it has, because, you know, having come out of the finance industry, you can imagine, after 2008, which was quite an experience, where that was just after the financial crisis. So, you know, the last thing I had was energy to build the organization which the Bulungula Incubator is now. But having taken that break, you know, we were very energized, and that's what really kicked things off. But we then really enjoyed that and wanted to plan to continue to do this again, and we made the commitment that we would plan over the next 5 years so that we could take another sabbatical in around 2015, 2016. And again, we went traveling. That time was around China, and Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and then all of Southeast Asia. So traveling along land, all public transport, and you know, local buses, walking, hiking with our backpacks, using a tent. So we travel very cheaply, and we plan it for 5 years. So both in terms of saving resources, and also we then realized after that sabbatical how good it was for the organization, because now the Bulungula Incubator was certainly not as big as it is now, but it was a substantial organization. After we got back in 2010, so from 2010 to 2015, in those 5 years, you know, we'd built you know, a fairly an impactful organization that was doing a lot of work, and we had to plan for the kind of systems that it needed. But it was also a very good way for us to look very carefully at the hit by the bus scenario, as we call it. What if something happens as founder members? Are we sure that we've built an organization that is resilient? And then post the sabbatical, understanding, was this organization anti-fragile? As you would know, that term was coined by Nassim Taleb, and anti-fragile meaning that the organization is stronger after a shock. So that's more than resilience. What do you have to put in place, and how do you have to develop an organization so that when there is a shock, that organization will be able to be stronger after that? And so when you go and you leave, what happens, and how does organization develop? And then we took our next sabbatical in 2021. And again, the organization has become stronger. People step up in different ways. And we truly know how to exit this organization as founder members, and our roles have changed and evolved over time. We're still involved in the organization, but in very different roles than we would have been if we had never taken time out and actually left it for a substantial amount of time to be without us.
Okay, thank you. And you've touched on this question that I wanted to get into, which is about the impact on the organization. I was talking with someone earlier today actually about this seminar, and I said that we're going to talk about sabbaticals, and the person said to me, well, I can't imagine, most people don't go back, or that can't be very good for the organization. And I said, well, I don't know, well, let's see. And you've touched on this, right, that it can in many ways force you to strengthen the organization and to see, what needs to be shored up, what needs to be put in place so that it is robust. And Susanna, this is certainly something that relates to your research on founders and on the transition from founder to organizational leader. So tell us a little bit about what you learned from that work.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was listening to Esther and Réjane share their rationale for doing this, and I was thinking, oh my God, if every founder or more founders thought this way, I think first of all we would have way less toxic organizations. Let's just call it out. But also we would have healthier conversations about what it means actually to transition from founder to leader, or even remain in the organization in various ways, or not remain, or because I think, Réjane, what you spoke to is so important in terms of even having that space to reflect, right? That time both shows whether the organization can live without you, and gives you some space to think about what role might you want to play, and it doesn't have to be the same today as in 5 years. And I think the challenge in foundership, and some of the founders I study, is that space isn't given, even to consider what could my role as founder be if I'm no longer the exact same way that I was on day one, or in the first startup stage. And I think that, to be honest, even some of what I find in my research is that it's often not just the founders, it's who's around them and what are the messages they're getting from key stakeholders, or even I would say the public as a whole, to say, can we challenge what a traditional notion of a founder is, as in someone who's completely on their ground with their babies, so to speak, right? So I think that the flip of this is what shows up in my research, to be honest. What I see a lot of is what happens if this doesn't happen. And founder syndrome, which I spoke about earlier, is a lot about not letting go even a little bit. And this is letting go quite a bit. So in 2019, I did a visiting term in Boston. I was in Boston College, and there I came across a foundation that's based there called the Bar Foundation, and they have this incredible program where it's specifically for founders, and where they will supply your salary to your organization for you to take a sabbatical, but they plan it for you, as in they make you go to Brazil for 3 months. And so they specifically take you out of your context, but they do it in this very intentional way where for the first 3 months, you're way more involved still, like you're still connected, where they're, and they give you space. But by the time you're already in the second stage, it's like a rule in the program that you can no longer be as connected. And so it's very intentional. And I remember when I first came across this, I was like, this is groundbreaking. I wish we had more programs like this. So yeah, I think this is the main way it shows up. And also, I think we might be in a time where these conversations, there's a little bit more space for them. When I was writing my notes for our conversation, I was thinking I should mention that, for example, there's an Instagram account called the Nap Ministry. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. And it's literally to say rest is allowed, period, for all of us, right? So if we extend that into leadership, where there's this expectation that you're supposed to be on 24/7, and almost that you are not a human, right? I think that's the part that's really important. There's this notion of like, you're not allowed to have all the same emotions at the same time, or doubts or whatever. So I just think this is, so the right time to be having this conversation. Yeah.
Very powerful, really an amazing example of this, the foundation in Boston that supports that practice. It's an encouraging sign of what might be to come. So we're going to move to questions from you all in a few minutes, but I want to pose sort of a bit of a double final question to Esther and Réjane and Susanna, which is, you've talked about how you do this, and we've talked a little bit about how it can be beneficial for the organizations, your own organizations, whether you're transitioning from one to another or staying with the same organization. And I would just like to ask in closing, if you could say a word or two about both how this has helped you to have greater impact and what practically those of us in this room could be doing to access that as well, to start this practice for ourselves.
Réjane, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Why don't we keep the same? It's quite good to keep the same. I think the same order. Then we don't bump into each other.
No problem. Susanna, I loved what you said. This is a moment to rethink all of this. The ways of working, and I'll say particularly in the US, were just unsustainable. And we have to think about work so differently than in the past decades. And I'm so proud to lead an organization that is remote first and still achieving the same results financially and impact wise. And I just think about how my generation led, and it can't be the way that the next generation of leaders should have to take things forward. People need breaks. We've just changed to a use it or lose it PTO policy, which means people have to plan and they have to take the time off. They are owed that time off and they should use it. And it's about planning, and it's about being clear about who's going to step in and take on the roles that the person will leave behind. It provides an opportunity for people to step up. I love seeing other colleagues who are going forward in their careers have a chance to step up into more leadership roles when people take a break. We even have a policy that at 5 years, at the 5-year mark in the organization, any person in the organization can take a full year off, and their role will be in place when they come back. A lot of people have built up holidays when they could carry it over from year to year, and they can use that time, but people are allowed a full 1-year sabbatical at West, which is a great policy. I would encourage more organizations to consider that. But in my case, after a sabbatical, I came back with a stronger sense of clarity around my purpose. I came back more grounded in terms of how I wanted to protect my time with family, with my children. I came back more regrounded on how my friends and the time with them fits into my life. I came back regrounded and reset around my own health and wellness. And I came back more energized. And my board often comments that they were glad that I took a year off, that I could enter this role with the kind of energy that I came into the role with, very different from when I did transitions before. And I think it's important then, when you've had that break, to not burn out when you return, but to continue to conserve the energy and to pace yourself.
Okay, thank you. Réjane.
So I just want to respond to just a couple of important points that were made. Susanna said something about somebody had mentioned, going back, and is that good for the organization? It might not be good for the founder to come back. It's a very good point. And what I did, we did an exercise with the board and with the organization every time that we came back, would be to say what what role, is there a role for you? And what does that role look like? So it's not just an automatic re-entry, because if you as a founder member really care about the organization, you care about the organization continuing beyond you. And we all, as much as we don't like to think about it, we all know that we have an expiry date. So if you want that expiry date to, when it does come, and we don't know when that comes, but we know it's going to come, and you want the organization to continue, you want the impact that you've had and the reason that you started the organization to continue, then you can't be afraid of going away and there not being a role for you back in the organization. So you have to, part of the exercise has to be that you are prepared to let go, that if the organization changes in the time that you're away, where there's no role for you when you come back, well, then you've actually been quite successful, because you've now built a sustainable organization. You've built an organization that if something was to happen to you tomorrow and you were no longer there, that it would continue and continue to make the impact that you built it for. And there is no greater success than that. And so working yourself out of the job as a founder is your number one job. And it should be what you want to have happen, because otherwise there is no organization into perpetuity, and there is no impact into perpetuity. And so first prize really is that you aren't needed, and that will come in its own time. So every time you do the re-entry, every time you go back, you do have to go through an exercise with the board, with the organization, with the senior leadership, to say, what does the role look like now, and be very intentional about it. And then I just want to make a point about, because the Bulungula Lodge was our very first project, and it still continues to operate, we're very in touch with trends that happen in the tourist industry post-COVID. And after COVID, there's been a significant change, certainly in South Africa, and I don't know if it's around the world, but it could be. It's that people stop taking long breaks, or even 3-week vacations or 1-month vacations. They've started taking 1-week vacations, but 3 1-week vacations instead of 3-week vacations. We don't entirely know why that is. It could be for 2 different reasons. Number one, people, something's happened to our psyche that we don't want to plan sort of long breaks for the long term, because with COVID, things got disrupted. So you don't want to be too far away from home. And so you do sort of close by vacations, not too far away. You don't go into very exotic, far away places and take the time to travel there. It could be that. It could also be that working online's become so normalized. So we have lots of people, coming to Bulungula because our network isn't very good and we're off grid. People come here to digital detox. Now people want to know, how good is your Wi-Fi, because I need to work from there for some of the days of my vacation. Lots of people are doing that, and it's not good. Just because you can work online doesn't mean that you take your 2-week vacation and then and then work for 2 of those days, or stay online or keep working. And that's become a habit that people have, that's become quite entrenched, and I think it's worrying. So there's no way that you are as rested in 3 short breaks than what you are in 1 longer break. And so 3 1-week vacations, you're not going to be as rested as you are in 1 3-week vacation. So I think that's important to think about, how we take our vacations, and whether we really shut off from work, because I think it's partly the working from home, and partly because all the digital devices have just become so insidious in our lives. And then another, just we're talking about advice for people planning their own sabbaticals. What's very important, more than the time, the time's arbitrary. If it's 1 year is great if you can do that. 9 months is great, 6 months, but it kind of gets arbitrary as to exactly the time. But what is very important, however long your vacation is to take yourself completely out of your reality. It's not about the beautiful beach that you're going to lie on. I mean, we don't, we lie on beaches for some of the time of our sabbatical, but not most of the time. I mean, we do quite adventurous travel, and it's quite hard travel sometimes when you crossing the Congo and you're walking to a village. You come on a motorbike in a small village in the Congo. The reason why your brain is refreshed is because it's so far outside of your reality. Not because you were lying around doing nothing. Because some people, I'll get bored, I'm not doing anything for a year. There's no way you get bored when you are backpacking across the Indian subcontinent, across the African continent, going into small villages, getting to know people, sleeping in a tent, in the middle of nowhere, sailing down the Congo River on local boats. And when you get completely out of your normal reality, you're not sort of the different identities that we always, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a founder, I'm not a finance professional. I just showing up in this village where nobody knows who I am. They don't know any of my titles, they don't know any of my degrees, and they don't care. They want to know whether I've got a smile on my face. And they couldn't care if I was a preschool teacher, if I was a CFA charter holder. They want to know if I'm a nice person. And shedding those identities completely for some period of your life is the healthiest thing that you can do as a human being. And that's what gives your brain a complete refresh and a complete break from every day.
Okay, thank you. Really powerful. Let's open it up to some questions. Questions from those of you here in the room, and those of you joining online, please put questions in the chat and we will pick those up.
Yeah, I think Réjane's last answer sort of touched upon this, but I was just thinking, so many times we feel really stuck in a rut, or we're working on a particular problem and it just seems like it's getting nowhere. So in Esther or Suzanne, your experience, or Réjane's, did you feel like it also helped with that, where sort of were able to get a very new perspective or have an aha moment with the problems that seemed a little intractable while you were trying to fix them every day?
I'm going to repeat the question. I know those of you joining online couldn't hear everything. So the question was about, often, in your work, you feel like you're in a rut and you're sort of like getting into this intractable problem space and you can't get out. Does the practice of taking sabbaticals help with that, and how does it help with that?
I have thoughts, but I feel like.
Go ahead, Susanna.
Go ahead.
I don't, it's like, I don't know what I found. So let me say this. Okay, so I lead these retreats for women, and that's what my answer is going to come from. They're week long, and they're a mixture of leadership and yoga, and this is where like the body becomes. The reason why I thought this was important to do, it's what I wish I knew. It's the things I wish I knew when I was in formal leadership roles. On this last retreat, which was in October, we had a number of like sort of high level corporate execs. And one of them had not been shut off for her whole 16 years that she's been in her particular, like shut off on a vacation. And the things that we witnessed happening within that person's mind and other people's minds, the creativity that came out, of course, gave a new perspective on those things, but it's so much bigger than that. It's beyond that. It's the realms that you're not even tapped into because you're in your autopilot every day, right? So I don't know. My thought on it is you don't even know what impact it's going to have, basically, when you take that break.
You can't even imagine where it will take us.
Exactly.
Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a wrong way to take a sabbatical? Because one of the things I thought that was really interesting was when you talked about the Bar Foundation and how they help care the company, because I have heard a few founders who are like, it would collapse without me, or they take a week and they're like, see what happened? There was a crisis. When part of me wonders how self-fulfilling that partially is and how critical that piece of preparedness. Can you elaborate on someone? Do you know what I'm asking?
So I'll rephrase again for those of you joining online. Is there a wrong way to take a sabbatical is the question. And how do you prepare the organization and yourself to take a sabbatical in a way that's effective and valuable for you and the organization?
We spoke about this in preparing for the seminar, and Susanna, Réjane, and I agreed on one word, and that's planning. It is planning from all different angles, planning on who will do what when you're away, planning for how you're going to be away. I think that's what it comes down to. In my organization, I'm amazed at when people step away. One of my colleagues has stepped away for 3 months. She'll be back in March, and she left behind about an 8-page memo on all the things that are pending and who's going to do what. She set up all her one-on-one and regular and monthly meetings and who will represent her in those conversations. But it is literally about planning and thinking about this well. And we're also very disciplined to follow the plans that have been put in place. We have to resist all temptation to say, why don't we give the person a call? Why don't we check in with them? And I remember during both of my maternity leaves now 20 plus years ago, the practice then was the CEO might give us a call, and we were kind of on call. That's not okay. Whether it's parental leave or a sabbatical, that's not okay anymore. It wasn't okay back then. And it was practiced back then. And I am not going to be personally one of those leaders who says, this is how we had to lead, and so this is what my colleagues are going to have to do in the future. No way. We need new ways of organizing our workplace. So when people step away and they have thought through so carefully how they're going to be unplugging, we need to respect that and refer to the plans and respect the plans that the individual has been put in place. So it's all about planning and respecting the space and break.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I can't agree with Esther more. But just to add that, I think we're very clear about what contact is okay and what contact's not okay. So I think being explicit about that is important, having that conversation before the time. So the one thing we do is to leave every WhatsApp group that you're on. I don't know if anybody's done that, but it's a really satisfying exercise. Just leave every group you're on. Even the friend groups, because all that chatter and all that connection to home and all that, talk about this and that and the news and whatever, it's not good for you. And it's really good to get away from that. And you don't need to know it, you'll pick it up again. We also, so you're not, because getting your mind out of your current reality is what you're trying to do. It's not just getting your body out of your current reality. In fact, it's more important getting your mind out of your current reality. And so the WhatsApp groups, even though they're fun ones, just leave all of them and tell people, sorry, I don't not love you anymore, but I'm just leaving this group and we'll pick it up when I get back, and then you rejoin your groups. Good clear out as well. And then what we do is we say that we will check, so people can't contact you for work things on WhatsApp. That's a rule. And you can also, if you want to be more intentional about it, is get a different SIM card in the country you're traveling in. So you keep your home SIM card separate. You can have a cell phone with dual SIM cards, but you get a local SIM card. And you can give that number to, your mother if you want, or your next of kin, or whoever you like. But just, keep that number sort of for emergencies, and so that they know that they can contact you on that local number if they really need to. And then the other thing to do work-wise is to say, whatever your parameters are, make a rule. I will check emails once a week, or I will check emails every 10 days, and then do that. Then check it every 10 days, see if there are any emergency. And what happens with that is then on the day that you leave, the next day, people think, oh, I need Réjane for this. And so they'll contact me, they'll WhatsApp me, they'll email me, and they'll solve their problem. If they know that I'm not going to check my email for a week, they will try and resolve 90% of the problems without me, because they can't wait a week for the answer. But if there's anything that you should have done enough planning so that they don't need to get hold of you for whatever period of time that you put. Let's say it's 5 days or 7 days or whatever. And then if they've got bigger issues, strategic issues, bigger questions, so people have to rely on themselves and lean on themselves. And the other thing that you have to do is you've got to be comfortable that some balls will get dropped. they will get dropped. They always get dropped. And so the way that we speak about it in our team is that you get rubber balls and you get glass balls. Be okay with the rubber balls dropping. They'll bounce back. It's not great. A ball has been dropped. Everybody's not happy. But think about whether that ball will actually bounce back. And it might. Try not to drop the glass balls. And there aren't that many glass balls. There are a few glass balls. So identify the glass balls. Talk around the glass balls. You can't plan for everything, but you can plan for the most important items, and those are your glass balls. List those glass balls, plan very carefully for them. You're not going to plan for all the rubber balls, and you're going to have to learn to be okay with some rubber balls dropping, and the organization will evolve because of it, and it'll be better for it. Oh, and there was one other point I wanted to make, which was that, you know, you also have to be, you know, careful what you wish for in this whole process, because you go away, you rest, and you become so energized that you end up taking on big projects. And then 2 years after that, you go, what was I thinking? I had way too much energy when I was tired and I was part of the grind and I had the millstone around my neck. I would never have tried to do that. And then you come back all energetic and you take on even bigger things. And then 2 years after that, you go, oh, geez, I need a sabbatical for what I did after my sabbatical. So yeah, that's just a little bit of a warning.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a great place to end on. I love the glass ball, rubber ball metaphor. That's fantastic. And thank you for reminding us to be careful when we come back from these amazing sabbaticals. Thank you all for a really fantastic discussion. Thank you for joining us here in the room, and thank you those of you joining online. If you're here, please join us for a reception afterwards right in this space. And I invite all of you to join us in the new year. Our next seminar is on January 19th. We'll be talking about refugee entrepreneurship.